The Gemara said on Gimel Amud Beis, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, if there's 3 lugim is a certain amount of certain measure. And I saw the 3 lugim, and the Torah says, Revi'at hahin. The Torah has sometimes the Torah says you have to pour wine on the Mizbeach. And Revi'at hahin, a quarter of a hin, is 3 lugim. A hin would have 12 lugin. So therefore, 3 lugin is something of substance. It has some chashivut. It's something that we find in a certain type of measurement. Just like on Shabbat, the amount of the cup of wine has to hold the reviyit. It has to have a certain amount of wine in order for it to be used for kiddush. So, because that shows chashivut. If you go ahead and you take a 1 ounce cup and you're going to make kiddush on a 1 ounce cup of wine, that doesn't do the trick. So too, when the rabbi said that mayim shuvim, water that was drawn, would invalidate a mikveh, we said when you make a mikveh has to be 40 sa, a certain measure of water. So if while you're filling up the mikveh for the first time, when let's say you have rainwater, you dug a pit and the rain is collecting in the pit, let's say it already collected a certain amount of rainwater, before it reached 40 sa, if you're going to pour in 3 lugim of water, that will invalidate the mikveh. Now the mikveh is not going to be a kosher mikveh, because you cannot have 3 lugim. If 3 lugim, that measure, which we said is considered a decent amount, because we find it has some sort of chashivut when it comes to the sachim, the mitzvah of pouring on the mizbeach, or that's the amount the amount of water that a person would wash his body with, 3 lugim. So the rabbis said that a mikveh that contains 3 lugim, Rashi says the rabbi said that mikveh is not kosher. Why did the Chacham say the mikveh is not kosher? Because they were afraid that a person would, if you're going to allow water to be poured into a mikveh, so people will go ahead and maybe use a mikveh which is not kosher. What will happen? They'll go ahead and they'll pour in, let the people want to wash themselves in like a tub, some sort of thing. And 3 lugim is an amount of water that people use for, let's say, washing. Some say that's the amount they would wash in a tub. And therefore, they might not use a mikveh that's in the ground. In order for a mikveh to be kosher, it has to be in the ground. And they were concerned, meaning like in the karka. Like all the mikvahs that we go to they're not above ground. They're not in a utensil, in a vat that's separated from the ground. It's inside the ground itself. And the rabbis were concerned that you would go ahead and if you would be man-made, if the 3 lugim of water would be poured in, you would go ahead and and use an inappropriate mikvah. So the rabbis made a gzeira. Excuse me. And they said you can't use a mikvah that 3 lugim of water was poured into the mikvah. Is that clear, Dr. Navid? I mean, it didn't collect naturally. It was poured in by the person. That's called mayim shuvim. Shuvim means you drew the water and you poured it into the mikvah. That will invalidate the mikvah. Okay. Now, the Gemara had a question. Now, what about if you pour into a mikvah? Let's say you're trying to get enough rain to naturally collect in a mikvah, and what you did was you poured some wine into the mikvah. Instead of pouring, there's supposed to be rainwater supposed to collect naturally in the mikvah. What you do? You poured some wine in the mikvah. Pouring wine in the mikvah would not. Second, Hamid Sher is trying to get in. Hello. Good morning, Hamid. You having trouble getting in? Good morning. Good morning, Morris. Let's see why it doesn't show you that. I don't know why it doesn't show me waiting room. Let me. If you could try again, maybe we'll try to see. Thank you. Yeah, he's gonna try to go back in. We didn't see if you see him come in. So we said if wine water, if wine is poured into the mikveh, the mikveh will not be invalid. Here comes Jaime. Thank you very much, Morris. Good morning, Jaime.
Morning, thank you.
Morning, welcome. So sorry about that. So we're back on Gimel Amud Beis 3b on the bottom of the page, like pretty much like the last line of the page. 3b4. So we were just discussing that the rabbi said that if a mikveh had rain, if water was poured into a mikveh, that would invalidate. If you poured 3 lugim of water, I'm trying to get a drink of water talking about water. The rabbi said that if 3 lugim of water was poured into a mikveh, the mikveh would not be kosher. The water has to collect naturally. You can't pour water into the mikveh, because the rabbis were concerned that if you would pour water into the mikveh, 3 lugim of water into the mikveh, people will use a mikveh that's not kosher, because they'll use a mikveh. They'll make like a little tub. They'll make their own private tub, and they'll use that as a mikveh, and that's not kosher. So therefore, you have to make sure the water collects naturally. But if you pour wine in, if you pour wine into the mikveh, wine will not invalidate the mikveh, because the concern of the rabbis is that you're going to come to dip yourself into a mikveh that's not kosher. Technically, wine is not water. So there's no concern that what are we afraid of? You're going to wash yourself with wine and use it, that we're not concerned about. So therefore, if you pour wine into a mikveh while you're creating the mikveh, let's say you dug a hole in the ground and rain is coming into the hole, and then you poured wine into the hole, even if you poured 3 lugim of wine into the hole, 5 lugim of wine into the hole, that's not going to invalidate the mikveh. It might not make it might not make any difference. Now, but if the color of the mikveh changes, if you poured enough wine into the mikveh that the whole color changes, it's no longer white, it's a different color, then that would invalidate the mikveh. And then we don't look at it as a water. The pasuk says it has to be a water. You have to go into a mikveh made out of water, a body of water. So it's no longer water. What is it? It's wine. Okay, we're going to consider it wine if it looks like wine. If the mikveh itself, the full body of water, 40 saw of water, the whole mikveh has appearance of wine, that would invalidate a mikveh. But we said, interesting, that means that, but if a small amount, if I poured a certain amount of wine in the mikveh, if it doesn't discolor the mikveh, it doesn't change the color of the mikveh would be kosher. Is that clear? So it comes out that wine, we'll call it 3 lugim, we'll call it 3 pints of water. If I pour, even though it's not exactly 3 pints, if I pour 3 pints of water into a mikveh during the process of while the mikveh is being created, because we said that once the mikveh was made kosher, I could pour water. Technically, water could be poured in. It's only in the creation of the mikveh, when you're in the beginning stages, when you're building the mikveh and the water needs to fill up for the first time, I cannot have water that was poured in, 3 lugim of water that would be poured in manually that will invalidate the mikvah. But if I pour 3 lugim of wine in the mikvah, that won't do anything to the mikvah as long as at the end of the day, the mikvah has a color of white. The mikvah has a color of white. Pouring in 3 lugim of wine would not invalidate the mikvah. Is that clear? Jaime, is that clear?
Yes.
It's very technical. We're doing.
What is considered formation?
What is considered what?
Formation.
I'm-
After that point, you're like, all
Wait, you need, it's called 40 sa. It's a certain amount of, it's 40 sa. 40 sa is the magic number. Once you have, sa is a certain measurement. So once you have a certain measurement of water, which is called 40 sa, then afterwards you could pour water into that mix. But when you're in the initial stage of the 40, it's like a baby. It takes 40 days for the baby. When the lady becomes pregnant, it's 40 days for the baby to form a certain basic formation of the baby. So maybe a mikvah also. The first 40 sa, the first 40, that's where you cannot manually pour in 3 lugim. If you pour in 2 lugim, you're fine. That will not invalidate the mikvah. It's only 3 lugim, which is considered a substantial enough an amount that the rabbis are concerned, and we're gonna make a gezerah. The rabbis are here to protect us, to make sure we don't make mistakes and use a mikvah which is not kosher. If we're gonna start pouring in 3 lugim of water into a mikvah, we're gonna think we could manually do certain, we could use certain types of things for mikvah which are not kosher. And therefore the rabbi said that will invalidate the mikvah. So now, the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, if you have 3 lugim of water, which we said 3 lugim of water is enough water that could ruin the mikvah, right? In the creation of the mikvah, if you have 3 lugim of water that you're pouring into it, it's not collecting naturally by the rain going into the pit. You are actually pouring the water in. He says if wine fell into those 3 lugim, let's say you mix some wine into that water.
But Rabbi,
Yes.
I don't know how you holding it, or maybe you haven't talked about it, but in my experience with mikvahs, we empty the mikveh to clean it, and then we fill it up with the regular water. And then there is what we call the special opening to the treasure, okay? So we fill up the completely the mikveh to regular water, but the treasure, which is like collected by the rain.
Right. Because what's happening, is because underneath there's water, the original water that was originally collected by the rain is underneath, that original spot is always there, that they use and now you're just adding. What you're doing every time when you're adding to the original water that was once there beforehand. See that you're not, when you're going ahead and you're emptying out the mikvah and cleaning the mikvah, it's not that when you empty it out the mikvah, there's no water remaining down there. There's always
there
water.
is the treasure.
The treasure. You call it the treasure. There's always water underneath that's always there. You just, whatever water, so there's always remains, that treasure of 40 sa of water is always there. Exactly. That's the treasure that's underneath, most probably. And then you're just emptying and cleaning out, adding new to that treasure. Exactly. That's what's happening. There's no time that we lose, that we get rid of any of the 40, the original treasure, as you say. That spot.
Only once a year you have to empty it completely to clean also the treasure.
Yeah, but even that there has to be a way that there has the treasure.
And then then they collect it from the rain.
But it has to be, most probably it's always still connected to some other treasure nearby. Many of the mikvahs has multiple treasures. Each mikvah has its own. It's connected to the other mikvah. However they do it.
Even though I remember when we built a new mikveh around here, it took them, because it was no much rain, it took them like a few weeks to fill up the treasures and then to start active the.
If I don't want to correct you, Yosef, but it took a few weeks for the treasures to be filled up, not for them to fill up the treasures. Do you know what I'm meaning? They didn't fill up the
Yeah,
treasure.
it's from
They
the
did-
rain. They collect the rain from the roof. And it has to
Exactly.
be also flawless. It cannot be like anything to stop the water from coming down.
Right.
Because if the water in some spots stop, it's non-kosher. It's not kosher anymore.
Right. These are some of the laws. Yosef is saying beautifully some of the laws that are involved in the creation of a mikvah, how to make the mikvah from the beginning kosher. Exactly. Beautiful, Yosef. So now we have a way. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav that even if you have the 3 lugim of water, which is considered enough of a water to ruin the mikvah if it's placed within the early stages of the building of the mikvah, if you pour wine into it, the mixing of wine into that water will, so to speak, will change the water from no longer being identified as water, but now it has a new name called wine. That's Rabbi Yehuda Marav's chidush. That even though it was water, it wasn't wine, but the dilution of the water with some wine, you hear that, Dr. Navid? You hear that, Morris? That changes the status of how we look at the water. And he says we look at the water now as wine. So if you poured that into the mikvah, now what you pour in? You didn't pour in 3 lugim of water. You poured 3 lugim of water that was diluted with some wine. So that dilution makes that wine, that water now kosher, so to speak, to be poured into the mikvah. It's considered like you poured wine into the mikvah. Wine does not ruin the mikvah unless the mikvah's color is totally changed. But if the mikvah's color is not totally changed, the mikvah will be kosher. So that is the chidush of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. So his chidush is that even though you had the magic number of 3 lugim of water that you poured in, but since it was poured in after wine diluted it, now it's not considered as water that was poured in, rather it's considered as wine that was poured in, and therefore the rabbis didn't feel that they needed to make a gzeira, a decree, to forbade that mikvah use, and they said that mikvah would be kosher, okay? As long as you have a total of 40 saw of kosher rainwater.
No, if we don't have the 40 cell water, you add it, it's still kosher.
He said it's kosher, but at the end of the day, you're still going to need to have 40 saw of water independent of these 3 lugim. That's what I'm saying. Now, that was the Gemara's. That was because the wine is. We consider this still wine. It's like if I pour wine, let's say it's not water, it's wine. I need 40 saw of water. It doesn't ruin it, but it doesn't help, right? It's like neutral. This water, if I pour wine into the mikvah, in the creation of the mikvah, it doesn't do any benefit. It doesn't help me in my 40 saw, but it doesn't ruin the mikvah. Morris, is it clear? Okay. The Gemara said, V'hatani Rav Chia, when the last line of the page, on Gimel and base, V'hatani Rav Chia, Horidu es mikvah. Rav Chia says that if it's 3 lugim of water, which we say is a significant amount of water, enough that the rabbis would decree would invalidate a mikvah, even if you poured wine into that water and it looks like it has a color of wine, it will invalidate the mikvah. He holds that the color doesn't change the essence. The essence of it's 3 lugim of water. The fact that you added some color has a different color. Because we may hit the sound, because here they only added a little bit of wine. It was like a small amount of wine, so it's not a significant amount of wine that maybe you would consider this real wine. I wonder if you would have added a significant amount of wine to these 3 lugim of water, maybe we would say that's normal wine dilution. How do you drink wine? You have many wines, you have a certain amount of water to the wine, right? A lot of water added. But here, it's not that you added a lot of wine to this water. that it's normal wine. You added a very small amount of wine, but it's like a color. It has the wine color now. So having the wine color, is that enough that we don't consider like wine? So Rav Chia says it does not, the mikvah would be invalid if you have 3 lugim of water that has, even if it has a little color of the wine and it looks red, we don't go after the color. We go after the essence. Okay? In today's political world, the world out there, just to be a little, we're in the month of Adar, Black Lives Matter type of idea. Is it the black? Is it the color that's the main thing, or is it what is, or is it the essence? That's what are we going after here? So he says, but it's the essence. If the water is if it's still water, the fact that it looks like wine, still water. We're not going to go after the color. We're going to go after the essence, what it is. So that's the Gemara's contradiction to Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Rabbi Yehuda Amarav says it's all about the color. If the color is red, we'll consider it like wine. And here we have a braita that says, you don't go after the color. But Tani Rav Chia horidu es mikvah. It brings down the mikvah. The 3 lugim of water that go into the mikveh, even if it has a color of wine, it will ruin the mikveh.
Why do they concentrate that wine being wrapped?
I mean, the Gemara is just bringing up what would be the halacha status, meaning what must probably happen is the following. A person maybe, was thinking, they didn't maybe know all the halacha. And for some reason they wanted it, whatever reason they poured in some water, but they put some wine into it. Why people would do this? It's a good question. Why would they do such a thing? Yes, I don't know why people would do it, but now the Gemara wants to know, it's a hypothetical case. You're right. I don't know why people would do such a thing. The Gemara wants to know what would be the halacha in such a case.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Almost a year ago, we discussed, remember I asked you about doing a mikveh in a river, and you're like, no, it's a raining or snow melting or whatever it is. But, we're talking about the same thing, when you dig a hole in the ground and it's filled up by the rain, okay? So if the river have like what we call like a sinkhole, not sinkhole, like a water hole, that the water stay there no matter what, even if the river stop flowing because the rain stop or whatever, but there's still a water hole over there that is the amount of the water that you say. It's a kosher mikveh because, there's no man involved into adding the water there.
Okay, so let me just address what Yosef is saying a little bit. We're gonna just to make some things, a general rule about mikvahs. If it's rainwater, there's a difference between rainwater and spring water. Okay, big difference. Rainwater, the Torah talks about a mikveh mayim. Rainwater, a mikveh that's made from rainwater is only kosher if it's collected, if it's not moving. The water.
If it's a what?
If the water is stationary. If the water moves, a mikveh that you have, the mikvahs that we use that are made with rainwater, the water is stationary. There's no cracks in the wall. The water is not flowing anywhere. So if you have a river, if the water is moving, it would not be kosher for mikvah unless what you call the bottom, the natural springs. The natural springs, if there's more natural spring water than rainwater in this body of water, then we would go after the majority of the water. So if, let's say, you have a type of river that has, now all the man-made rivers are man-made, then those natural springs. If you call something a man-made river, it means there's no natural springs. So if it's no natural springs and it's a running water, it's not kosher for mikveh. You can't dip utensils in such a body of water. You can't go with you. You can't use your wife, yourself. You can't use such a mikveh if it's a moving water, man-made, and that means it's no natural springs. That's not kosher for a mikveh. If you have, so therefore, you would have to see the river. What's the majority of the water? Is the majority of the water natural springs? Is the majority of the water rainwater? But rainwater that's kosher for mikvah has to be non-moving water. So there you have to understand that. So every time you want to make a barbecue, you buy yourself you buy yourself a knife and you want to tovel the knife in a mikveh. You have to make sure if it's a man-made river, right? That means man-made. How do we translate? How would Google translate a man-made river? A body of water that's flowing, that was made by man, that there's no springs. Correct?
So a lake is considered to be a mikveh then.
So how do you translate a lake? How does Google translate a lake? What's the definition of a lake? So you have to see. You have to know that the lake is a lake. That's not a. How does Google translate a lake? We'll have a Google translation. How they translate a lake.
Because there are more standing water than moving water, basically.
Again, but it's also moving water, right? You have to.
They're moving water because that's how he's getting fresh and he's getting his water. For the Kinneret in Israel. Okay, he's collecting rain from
surrounded by land, so therefore it's not a moving water, right? So they're translating the lake that it's surrounded by land. It's a large body of water. What?
But there is moving water. There is moving water by more water entering, and there is the river coming out of it, the Yarden River. So the water is moving. Otherwise, it will not be filled up, or it will be overfilled.
Okay, so it would have to be looked into more about the halachic of the lakes, exactly what status they would have. But that's the general rule. General rule. 1 second. But that's the general rule regarding you have to identify. These are the basic rules you got to work with. If it's rainwater, it has to be collected in one spot. If it's natural springs, that's a flowing water. That's not a problem. If the natural springs mix together with rainwater, then the question is, what is the majority? If it's a moving body of water, you go after the majority. Okay.
What about the Ali? Is now there's like through the cracks, water is coming.
So most probably that's more. I presume that's more natural springs, and the natural springs are the majority over there. Most probably.
But how does it move?
I'm not sure how they make. What they do over there. Okay, so the Gemara says Amar Rava. So Rava says lo kasha. Rava says that there's no contradiction between these two statements. Why not? Harab Yochanan ben Nori harabana. The opinion, there's one opinion is the Rabbanan, and one opinion of Yochanan ben Nori, which means Rav holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nori, that it all goes after the color. You look by the color. As long as the color is red, we don't consider it. If the color is red, we don't consider it water, and you're good. If the color is white, then it's considered a problem if you push the water if you pour the water into the mikveh. But if it's red, it's fine. That's what the Gemara did. We learned in the Mishnah. Shlosha lugim mayim chase kartov. We're now on the page Dalet and Aleph. 3 lugim. Morning, Mr. Amy. 3 lugim of water that was missing a small amount. It was not a full amount of. It wasn't the magic 3 lugim of water, which we said 3 lugim of water would invalidate the mikvah if it was poured into the mikveh within the first 40 saw. But here you were missing a little bit. You were missing, let's say, a small amount of that water. So therefore, you did not have the full measure that will invalidate the mikveh. Okay, but what happened to that? You had 3 minus a little bit. You didn't have the full 3. Again, 3 lugim would invalidate the mikveh if you poured in 3 lugim of water. But what happened? You had 3 lugim of water minus a small amount, but a little bit of wine fell in to this 3 lugim of water. So now the question is, will this little bit of wine, how do we look at this little wine that fell in? It fell in, and it looks like wine. So now we have 2 things. We have 2 things going for us. Number 1, we don't have 3 lugim of water. And number 2, it doesn't look like water. It looks like wine. So it fell into the mikveh lo pasluhu. It does not invalidate the mikveh because we don't have 3 lugim of water that was pushed into the mikveh. Similarly, let's say you have 3 lugim of water minus a little bit, a little bit of milk. The baby poured a little bit of milk into this, poured his milk bottle into this 3 lugim of water. And it even looks like water. So here we have a worst case. It looks like water, but it's not 3 lugim of water direct. It's 3 lugim minus a little bit. Now that the milk came into it, now it looks like water. But now and it looks like water. Do we say it invalidates do we consider these 3 lugim like water and it would ruin the mikveh? Or do we say the fact that it was not 3 lugim of water to begin with, it's like if you want to know how much we have natural water, 2.9 lugim, you have 0.1, let's say, of milk. So we don't look at it as 3 lugim of water. So that's the first opinion. Lo pasluhu. Here's the language of the Gemara. Gimel lugim, 3rd line from the top. 3 lugim mayim of water. Chasem, missing kartuf. Missing that small amount. You see it in the Gemara, 3 lines from the top? Yeah. You got it? The 2nd line. Gimel lugim mayim. 3 lugim of water. Chasa kartuf. Missing a small amount. Shenafal l'tochan. That fell into it. Kartov chalav. A little bit of milk. Umarheim. And the appearance is kamare mayim. It appears like water. The naflu mikveh, and then was poured into the mikveh. Lo paslu will not invalidate the mikveh. However, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nori Omer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nori says, "Hakol holech achahamar." It all goes after the way it looks. It doesn't make a difference. He says, if it's going to look like water, then it would invalidate the mikveh. He says, it's all about the color. If it looks like water, it will invalidate the mikveh. Now, so the Gemara. So what's clear here is that the first opinion of the Gemara that says that the mikveh is kosher is only because you did not have 3 lugim of water. But if you have 3 lugim of water, they don't care about the color. Is it all about the color or not about the color? Today we live in a world that everybody thinks it's all about color, right? It's all about color. That's the only thing that's important. But we see from the Gemara that we have a Makkos here in the Gemara. The Gemara has 2 opinions here. How do you like that mistake? You have 2 opinions in the Gemara. It's a color. I got to be careful when I say it. If the color is the main point. So the first opinion holds: if you have 3 lugim of water, even if the color looks like wine, it will invalidate the mikveh. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nori says, if the color is wine, it will not invalidate the mikveh. So Rabbi Yehuda Amarav opinion, who says as long as the color is good, everything is good, he is of the opinion like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nori. That's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says that this actually is a dispute. There's a machlokes, do you go after the color or not? is the color the determining factor? If you have or not. So that's what the Gemara says. It's a matter of dispute. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Rav Papa had a question. The boy Rav Papa says, Rav Tani Chosakata Reisha. Did Rav learn in the Reisha that it was missing a small amount of water? Of a shlosha lugim. But if there was 3 lugim, if there would be 3 lugim, the Tanakama Hasli, if there would be 3 lugim, the Tanakama would say it would invalidate it, even if the color got better. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan says it all goes after the color. And if that would be the case, so Rav's opinion would only fit Rabbi Yochanan Menori. The Gemara is now going to say, and we'll see more tomorrow, and we'll finish up this piece tomorrow, that it depends how the text of the Breita. We have a Breita, or really the text of the Mishnah. We have a Mishnah. The question is, what was the text of the Mishnah? Did the Mishnah say it started out with 3 lugim minus a little bit, or the Mishnah said it had 3 lugim without not missing anything? So that's going to be the question tomorrow, and we'll clarify this. It's a very technical point the Gemara is into today, but we see how a mikveh has to be made properly and all the details, and we'll hopefully come to appreciate it more.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What? Morning. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good day.
So she did a great thing. So she did a great thing. Okay, that's part of, maybe get someone to help you wash it. Okay. That's what you got this. Have a great day, Jaime. All the best.